welcome to tonight's information session. I hope you're all here to learn a lot, and I hope that's exactly what we do together. So please, as we're just giving a few minutes grace period for everyone to log in, I'd love to hear which suburb you're from. So there's a little chat box that you should be able to access, and I can see Julie from Docklands has let us know where she's from. Thanks so much, Julie. Anyone else want to share in the chat box which suburb they're from? Hi there, Harry from Brunswick. Fabulous. So already we've got a couple of different suburbs there represented. We've got Tatiana from Deer Park. Wonderful. So right over in the west there. Sharon, just while everyone's letting me know where they're from, Louise isn't able to access the session. I'll just let you know.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
I will get out of here and I'll come back and
wonderful.
join back in after.
I can see there's a couple of other participants there. If you want to let me know where you're from as well. No one else wanting to tell us exactly where they're from tonight, and that's okay. We can respect that not everyone might want to have a little chat in the chat box. So we should be left without barriers employees to join these sessions? No, so don't worry, Harry, we're absolutely here to talk about foster care this evening. So the reason that we're here tonight is to talk to people who are interested in becoming foster carers about foster care. So please don't feel that you have to be a Life Without Barriers employee to be here. You're absolutely welcome to be here as a member of the public. And in fact, that's what we hope to do this evening, is talk to you about what foster care is. So with that said, I'm just checking my clock and it is 3 minutes past 6. So I think we can safely get underway with our presentation. So I'm just going to jump in. I will have one of my colleagues joining me. She's just having a few issues accessing the session. So just to let you know, there may be someone else jumping on the line again shortly as well. So before I dive in and start talking about foster care, I will just acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging as well. An important thing to do before we start any meeting or presentation here at Life Without Barriers. So some introductions and housekeeping. So my name is Hannah and I am the Carer Practice Manager here at Life Without Barriers Victoria. And unfortunately for you, you're going to be hearing a lot of my voice tonight, so I do apologise for that in advance. I do have my trusty sidekick Louise, who's normally on the call by now, but she is having some technical issues, so I'm sure she'll be along shortly. But if Louise isn't able to join us, I will perform her role and look at the chat box. So if you have any questions as I'm speaking this evening, I don't want you to forget those questions. It's really important that we answer them for you. So we don't interrupt the flow of the presentation though, what I'm going to get you to do is type your questions into the chat box. And if you haven't been able to find the chat box yet, there's a little 3 dots that say more and then a chat function that might pop up for you. So just have a bit of explore and hopefully you'll be able to find that chat box. Of course, within that chat box, we just want you to be mindful of your own confidentiality. So for really personal or specific questions, we can always speak with you privately. So I'll give you a couple of options at the end of the session about how you might catch up with us privately, so you can talk about really personal or specific things around your family, your household, etc. So you don't need to do that in public. So let's have a little bit of a look at what we'll be talking through this evening. Oh, I can see Louise just logging in now. Welcome, Louise. How are you?
Finally. Oh my goodness, that was such scary time.
Yeah, don't worry. I was equally scared not having you here, but we're pushing through. Everyone's being great, and I've got a couple of people in the chat already, so we're moving on through. Wonderful. So everyone, just to introduce you to Louise, she's our carer engagement officer here in Victoria. So she's one of the people that you might end up speaking with if you do decide to proceed through the foster care process. We absolutely love her and she's excellent at answering any and all questions. She's heard it all before and she doesn't judge. So she'll be manning the chat box for me this evening to make sure I get to your questions later on. So let's have a look at what we're going to talk through first. So we have basically answering questions. That's really what we're aiming to do. I want you to leave tonight with more information in your minds than when you arrived. That's the overarching concept. So we'll help you to find out if fostering is right for you and for your family. So we're going to do that by looking through these kind of topics or structure. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about us, Life Without Barriers. We'll talk, obviously, importantly, about what foster care is. It's important for you to know that if you're deciding to be a foster carer. We'll talk about where more foster carers are needed, the different types of foster care. We'll tell you a little bit about the children in care. We'll talk about stories from foster care. We'll talk about who can be a carer, and hopefully by the end of tonight, you'll realise that you could be a carer. We'll answer some frequently asked questions for you. And if we get all the way through all of that and I still haven't answered your question, that's where I'll come to your questions from the chat box this evening and make sure we get to those as well. And at the very end, we'll give you some options about where to from here and where you might choose to get some more information and have our team follow up with you. So that's what we're going to cover. Lots to cover, so let's dive right in. So firstly, who is Life Without Barriers? I might refer to us as Life Without Barriers or LWB throughout this evening, just to let you know we are one and the same. But basically, we're a leading social purpose organisation working in hundreds of communities all over Australia, of course, including here in metropolitan Melbourne. So we support children and young people in foster care and kinship care. We support people with disability. We support refugees and asylum seekers. And we support Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as well. So that's just some of the program areas that we do have at Life Without Barriers. Of course, our foster care program, which is where you'll end up if you become a foster carer with us, is right here in the child, youth and family space. And our theme colour is pink, which suits us just fine, doesn't it, Louise? So what is foster care? This is probably the most important thing for us to talk about tonight, isn't it? So when children need time away from their family, foster care provides them with a safe and supportive home where they can heal and grow. So foster care might be for one night, it might be for a week, it might be for a year, it might be for 10 years. It totally depends on the child and their circumstances. At the end of the day though, foster care is temporary care. So in the state of Victoria, the aim is always to reunify families or keep families together where we can, if it's safe and appropriate. So there's around 50,000 children at any given time throughout Australia who need to be in foster care or can't live safely with their families. So that's a really huge statistic, isn't it? And you can see why people like you coming along to our information session tonight and showing an interest are so important so that we can find safe and appropriate homes for these children. So where are foster carers needed? Everywhere is the short answer. So every suburb across Australia, I can absolutely guarantee you there are foster care placements needed. So here's some stats from around Australia, and you can see the numbers are quite high in some of our bigger states, obviously along the east coast here. You'll notice down in our little state of Victoria, our little bit mighty state, there are around 1,500 children in foster care at any given time and a whopping almost 7,000 children who are in kinship or relative care. What we mean by kinship or relative care is that they're not staying with foster carers, but they might be staying with an auntie or an uncle or a grandma or a grandpa, something like that. So we have a real focus here in Victoria on keeping families together. And you can see that our kinship and relative care numbers are quite high compared to other states, and our foster care numbers are relatively low comparatively. So that's just a little bit about Victoria and the way we choose to operate here. So are there different types of foster care? This is a really common question that we do get. Absolutely, there are different types of foster care. So I'll just call out a couple of them here. So respite care is one type of care. It is short break care. So it might be for a weekend, it might be for a week during the school holidays. And it's generally when we have a child who's already in a longer term foster care placement, and those carers perhaps have a wedding on this weekend and children aren't allowed to come. So those carers need somewhere safe and appropriate for the child to go, and that's where respite carers might step in and offer some respite care to the child. It's planned in advance as well, is the important point about respite care. And then we move across over here to emergency care, which is exactly as it sounds. It's this immediate, urgent need for a child to come into care and be kept safe. So the call for emergency care might happen at 3 in the afternoon, it might happen at 3 in the morning, or it might happen at any hour in between. So emergency carers do need a degree of flexibility for sure. And it might be for one night that a placement's required, or anything up to 4 weeks at a time in those emergency situations. Then we've got short-term care here. So short-term care is anything up to 6 months at a time. And normally what we see happening in a short-term care situation is that a child's removed while specific issues or problems are worked out at home with their parents. And then once those issues are resolved, if it's safe and appropriate, the child will be reunified back to mum and dad. If that's safe and appropriate, that's always what the aim is to do here in Victoria. Then there's longer term care over here. So that is basically anything that's 6 months and above. So long-term carers, we're really looking for them to support children toward adulthood, and we really need a stability, a sense of stability in all of our care types, but particularly in that long-term piece. So some children in long-term care are never expected to go back home and live with their family in full time. That's not all children in long-term care though, just to place that caveat there. So that is some of the different types of care that you might be able to apply for here in Victoria. So of course, when it comes to fostering, no two children are the same unless we get identical twins, which does happen, and no families are the same either. So some children might need foster care for a few nights, others might need it right through until they're 18 years of age. There really are lots of different stories and circumstances, so we have to be ready to be flexible and to meet children where they're at and meet their needs. So that's a bit about the types of care. I'm going to talk briefly about the Life Without Barriers approach to foster care. So what is it that guides all of the decisions that we make and the work that we do every day here? So to support really good outcomes for children and young people, here at Life Without Barriers, we implement an evidence-informed and therapeutic model of care. And to make it really easy for us to remember the name of it, it's called CARE. So that's really handy. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the 6 principles that underpin CARE so that you can understand a little bit about how we operate. So care is relationship-based, or it recognises that children need trusting and meaningful relationships with the adults who care for them so that they can build social and emotional confidence. And that really helps them when they're kids, but also then when they grow into adults as well. It is developmentally focused, so it recognises that strategies for change need to meet children where they're at. So we don't want to overwhelm children, but we do want to challenge them appropriately and help them to develop and grow. It's trauma-informed, so it's making sure that we always consider the impact that trauma can have on a child's development and behaviour, and that we as the adults in the situation are modifying our expectations and interactions accordingly. It's family involved, so really recognises that our sense of identity is tied to our family and our community and our culture, and that's especially important for children in foster care who may have been removed from their family. So it's absolutely vital that we're making sure we support those connections for children in foster care. It's competency centred, so ensuring that children are supported and encouraged to develop skills and knowledge and attitudes they need as children, but also, again, as adults. When they grow up and they leave care, we're giving them the things they need to negotiate everyday life. And it's ecologically oriented. In other words, we recognise that the environment around a child is absolutely critical, and we need to be considering what that environment is doing for the child, and is it therapeutic and safe, and the role models that exist in that environment as well. And some of the most important role models in a child's life are their foster carers when they're in foster care. So that's a little bit of a nutshell approach of what care means and how it guides our work here at Life Without Barriers. So let's talk a little bit about children in care. So before I jump into the slide, I'll just point out our lovely Kieran over here, so who does have a very handsome dog. I think it's important to point that out. So Kieran has a full-time job. He's now looking forward to buying his first home, and he entered foster care when he was 12 years old. So he says his foster carer played a big part in who he is today. And I think that's a really nice thing to ground what we're talking about, isn't it? The difference that you can make in the life of a child. So there's lots of different reasons why children might come into care. They come from all cultures, they come from all backgrounds and all around the country. Each child is going to have a unique set of needs and their own unique story. But what we do see most commonly is that almost all of them have come from complex family and social situations where they've suffered neglect and trauma and abuse. So these are the things we see overwhelmingly in children in care. So they might be 0, they might be 18, or they might be any age in between. They might come from a range of different cultural backgrounds, and all children in care have biological families who are important to them. I think that's important to remember. So children in care have all suffered some sort of trauma. So they've been removed from their family of birth, and that's traumatic. So some children have experienced physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. Others have witnessed really horrible things happen to the people that they love. Like family violence, and some of them have been neglected. And what we mean when we say neglected is that they haven't been given the care and support and supervision that they need to develop and grow. So that's a little bit about children in care. We'll talk now a little bit about the attributes and beliefs that we need carers to have. Basically, it's attributes and beliefs that we know are good for children. So I'll just point out a few of our little stories here. The first one is of Gary and Shell, and that's a Tasmanian couple, one of our carers with Life Without Barriers, and they provide long-term care for 6 to 11-year-olds. So they live on a farm, and they currently have 5 children in their care. So they've got 5 little siblings that are all able to continue living together and keeping that connection, because Gary and Shell were able to provide that long-term placement for them. And I think that's really special. Over here, we've got Stacey, who isn't a foster carer herself, but was brought up in foster care. So Stacey's now an adult, and she's studying a social work degree at university. And she remembers how important it was to her that her foster care family made her feel part of the family, which I think is, again, just a really important thing to hold on to. Then we've got the lovely Belinda over here on the right, and she provides short-term care for 5 to 18-year-olds. So Belinda is a single carer who works full-time in a very high-flying corporate position, and that hasn't stopped her from living out her dream of being a foster carer. So she's really made it work for her in her lifestyle. She started out doing weekend respite and emergency care, and she now provides things like short-term care as well. So there's lots of different stories here, but overwhelmingly what we're looking for are carers with the attributes and beliefs that we know are good for children. And you'll notice there's a little read more tab at the bottom of all these stories. They don't work on the slide, but these are taken from our Life Without Barriers website, where you can go and read these stories and lots more in full detail. And they're really good. They give you a great sense of what we're looking for in foster carers. So who can be a carer? It's an important question to answer tonight, isn't it? So it's very likely that you can. So carers might be married or single, living together or divorced. They might come from any background or culture. Really, what we are interested in is your ability to care for and nurture a child. That's what really matters to us. There's some eligibility criteria that we need all of our foster carers to meet. So you need to be over 21 years of age in Victoria, and you do need to have some relevant life experience. And what we mean by that is you need to have met a child. You need to have interacted with children and have a sense of what it actually involves caring for children. You do need to have a good clean bill of health, so be well and healthy and able to keep up with all of the needs that children bring along with them. You need to be financially stable and have a regular source of income. You might be from any cultural background. You might be single or in a relationship, that's fine. You do need to be willing to undergo background checks. It's an important thing that we're making sure people are safe and suitable when we're placing children in their homes, and background checks is a really easy way for us to do that. So things like police checks, a working with children check, etc. A little bit about your home and family. You might have your own children or not, that's totally fine. You can rent or own, that's fine. You do need to have a spare room in your home where the child is going to stay. So that's an important thing for you to absolutely have. There does need to be a car and a licensed driver within the household as well, because children in foster care can often have some additional appointments on top of what children outside of foster care might usually have. So there's a lot of commitments that you'll need to meet. And everyone in your household does need to be willing to participate in the assessment process. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. So we're going to now look at some frequently asked questions. And then after I've done the frequently asked questions, I'll come to your questions from the chat box as well. So firstly, some questions about you. I am single, can I foster? Yes, you can. So it's an overwhelming yes to that one. And you'll see here that about half of our foster carers are single. So families come in all shapes and sizes, and we need foster families to do the same thing. So absolutely you can foster if you're single. Same thing for this next question. We're a same-sex couple, can we foster? Yes, you absolutely can. You might be a single person married in a de facto relationship, a same-sex relationship, a heterosexual relationship. That's all totally fine. Again, what's really important to us is that you're able to provide a stable, safe and loving home for children and young people. That's the important stuff. Can I foster if I'm not a parent? This is a question we frequently get. The answer is yes. So we conduct this really thorough assessment to look at skills that you already have when it comes to children and skills that you might need to look at developing a little bit further. So we'll talk with you about that through the assessment. We also make recommendations about the age and needs level of children that might suit you best. So those are the things that we really unpack in detail throughout the assessment. But absolutely, we have many foster carers who come to us and are great carers, but they don't have biological children of their own. There's a little checklist here that I'd just like to share, which just kind of reiterates what are the things that we're looking for. What do great foster carers have? So patience, understanding, acceptance and availability. A commitment is really important, and a sense of resilience, flexibility, time to give, and a commitment to maintaining and strengthening a child's family relationships. So those are the things that really we're very focused on when it comes to you. So some questions about your home. Do I need to have a spare room? Yes, I've already touched on that one, and it can be a little bit of a sticking point for people, particularly in the inner city where spare rooms are few and far between. So it's important that you know that at this stage of the process, you are required to have a spare room. Your children, your biological children, can't share a room with a foster child, for example. A foster child needs to have their own room. This helps them to feel safe and secure in your home and in your family. So it's really important that we meet that requirement. Do I need to own my own home to be a foster carer? You don't. I'm a millennial, and every year the dream of owning a house gets further and further away, I think. So if that was a requirement, I think we'd run out of foster carers really soon. So you don't need to own your own home. You do need to be able to demonstrate that wherever you're living is safe and suitable to foster a child in. So you might be renting, you might be in public housing, you might be paying off your own home, or you might own it outright. You might be an apartment or a house or anything in between. The only sort of point I just make there is that if you do rent or you're in public housing, you might need to seek approval to have extra people in your home. And because we don't have the capacity to speak with everyone's landlords personally, that would be your responsibility to follow up. So just a little point there. Few questions about your family. So can I be a parent and foster other children? Absolutely you can. So when we do that assessment, your family situation is considered when we make decisions about the age and needs level of children that you might foster. So at Life Without Barriers, our general guide is that we place children in your care who are younger than your youngest child. So if your youngest child is 7 years of age, we don't show up with 16-year-old triplets and say, hey, this is a great idea. We try and place children who are younger than your youngest child. And evidence tells us that those placements typically work. There are exceptional circumstances where sometimes children in foster care might be older than biological children, but we talk that through with our carers as we go. So excuse me, if you're coming into the foster care process, your children should really be old enough to be able to tell you if a placement isn't working out for them. So if you have really young children, like babies or anyone sort of preschool age, you might like to consider postponing your application for a few years until they're old enough to understand. So will all my family be involved in the assessment process? Absolutely, they will. So everyone that's part of your household is involved in the assessment process to a degree. So this includes some formal assessments. So for people of age, it's things like a police check, a working with children check. We do medical checks and reference checks as well as part of the assessment. And we also have lots of wonderful, rich conversations as well with everyone in the household. So discussions and interviews. So if you have children living at home, our assessor might ask them how they feel about a child coming to live in the house, how they feel about sharing their toys. You'd be surprised how often that comes up in interviews with children, how they feel about sharing mum and dad's time with another child. And we'll ask them things about what routines and consequences and discipline are used in your home. We obviously don't come in and start, giving the Spanish Inquisition to really young children. So if they're quite young, we might ask them to draw pictures and have a conversation that way. So we always make sure that we're age appropriate. Really, what we're trying to do in that process is ensure that everyone in your household, no matter their age, is prepared for the significant changes that foster care brings with it. So that's really what we're there to do. So a few questions about children in care. How are children matched to foster carers? I love this question. So we complete a really thorough assessment. I think I've mentioned it a few times now, of yourself and your family and your household, and discuss the ages of children and needs levels of children that might be best placed with you. And then when we receive information about a child who needs a placement, we look at all the information that we have about the child, and we look at all of the information that we have about all of our available foster carers, and we decide from all of that information which is the most compatible match that we can make here. So that's how we match children with foster carers. Can I choose the age and gender of a child is a pretty common question we receive. So as I've mentioned, part of the assessment process is deciding what kind of child would fit in best with your family in terms of age and maybe gender. Some people come into the process and they're really open to all ages and all genders, and they don't really have a preference. Others, sometimes due to their own parenting or life experiences, are quite specific about a particular age and gender. So we always take your wishes and comfort level into account. But it's really important to note there that if you're coming into the process saying, well, I can only care for children who are aged between 4 and 4.5, and they have to be boys and they have to have blue eyes and blonde hair, we might have our hands tied because that's not going to be very many children. So we may not have the resources to assess you if you're going to have such strict and rigid preferences. So it's always part of the conversation. So a few more questions about children in care. This one can sometimes surprise people, I think. So do children in care have ongoing relationships with their family? So yes, the answer is yes. Where it's safe and appropriate, they absolutely do. So the parents and family members of children in care love them and want them to do well. And they also have a wealth of information that might be really important for you as foster carers to know. So it's really important that foster carers are able to support positive and ongoing relationships between the children they have in their care and their biological family members. So what happens if the placement isn't working out? Obviously, what we don't want is children coming into foster care and being moved around relentlessly from placement to placement because, oh, well, things don't work. What can happen if that's the case is that children start to blame themselves and think there's something wrong with me, and that's why this isn't working out. So we really try and avoid moving children multiple times where we can. So when you're out fostering, you will have close contact with a care team. There's a wealth of information and professionals wrapped around you, having open discussions and training, and you're offered lots of support through challenges. Sometimes you might think about things from a different perspective, and that can help. But ultimately, if a placement is going absolutely disastrously wrong and it's not going well for you or your family, all our hope is that we can work with you to find the best solution for you and for your family and for the child as well. And what we really appreciate is time. So if things aren't going well, it's really important that you talk to us early rather than it being a surprise at the end. So a few questions about the process. How long does the assessment process take? We've had people inquire with us on a Friday afternoon thinking that they can have a child in their care by Saturday. And unfortunately, that's not the reality. We have a really thorough process to go through with every applicant. So if you're thinking about fostering, you're going to have lots of questions for us. We're going to have lots of questions for you. And so the application process answers all of those questions for everybody, and it takes around 4 months. So if this evening you decide, yep, I'm really interested and you want to submit an inquiry, in all likelihood, if all things go well and there's no sort of roadblocks along the way, in about 4 months, you could find yourself accredited to be a carer. So it's quite a thorough process that we undertake to make sure people are safe and suitable, and that we've gotten to know you really well through the process, so we're making the right recommendations. There's 6 stages to the assessment process. People are really curious about what that assessment process looks like, so let's have a look. So there's your initial inquiry, which is, you might make one this evening after tonight's session. So that really involves talking to someone from our team and identifying if becoming a carer is right for you. You'll have a home visit, which at the moment is being done via Zoom. So you'll have a virtual home visit. You'll complete some paperwork. There's lots of paperwork in foster care. You do some training. It's really good training, and it goes over a couple of weeks, and it really gives you an opportunity to understand what fostering is all about. What are the realities of foster care and how might it work for yourself and for your family? There is the assessment process that I keep on mentioning, and that sort of takes place over a number of weeks and might be anything from sort of 4 to 6 interviews with yourself and your family members, references, etc. And at the end of that assessment process, we sit down and write up everything that we've talked with you about into a very big, long report, which you then read and sign off on. And then we take that assessment report along to what's called an approval panel, which is the Department of Child Protection and ourselves at Life Without Barriers sit down and really talk about what a great carer you're going to be. And in that panel process, we get normally the tick of approval same day to say, yes, you're approved as a foster carer. So that's what that sort of 4 months looks like stepped out. So a little bit about the support. So it's important that you know that foster carers are never alone in their caring journey. We don't just sort of shove a kid in your house and go, okay, good luck, bye. It can be an incredibly challenging thing to be a foster carer and very difficult to understand the children that come into your care and their behaviours. So it's really important that carers are really supported and confident in their role, because that means they're going to provide the very best care for children. So this is some of the types of support that you can expect to see as a foster carer. So there's ongoing training. There's 24/7 on-call support. So there's an on-call service here that, if something's going a little bit awry in the middle of the night, there's always someone that you can call, and one of our team will be on the end of that phone to talk you through it. There's some financial support. Not lots of financial support. You're not going to become a squillionaire by becoming a foster carer. Really what you receive as a foster carer is what's called a carer allowance, which contributes toward the everyday living costs of raising a child in your care. There's specialist support, so things like therapeutic specialists and clinicians that you have access to. There's respite, so if you have a full-time placement, you can have a break and know that the child is going to go into a respite carer home, and you know that those respite carers have been through the exact same process that you have, so they're going to be safe and suitable people. And there's also carer networking events as well. So we really encourage carers to form supportive peer relationships with one another. It's really important to us that you're able to lean on each other as well as your professional team who will be supporting you through a placement as well. So that's the end of the frequently asked questions. So I'm going to get Louise to let me know what questions we've had come through in the chat box.
We have no questions this evening, Hannah.
Questions. There you go.
That's right. They're obviously a very knowledgeable group.
You know what? That makes me feel really glad. Hopefully I haven't just bored them all to sleep. That's the problem with these webinars. You can all see me, but we can't see you. So Louise and I can't see if you have nodded off. I hope not. And I hope you have had all of your questions answered throughout that presentation. So there's a few different ways that you might go about finding out some information after tonight. And I'll just walk you through that now. So where to from here? Let's keep the conversation going about foster care. There are plenty of places that you can go to find out some more information. Some of them are here. So There's our foster care website, which is where all those lovely stories are, which I sort of showed a little bit of before. So I do encourage you to go and have a look at our website. After this session, you can fill in what's called a call me back form. And Louise is just going to paste the link for this form into the chat box now. And one of our team will contact you a couple of days after you fill this form in. When I say fill the form in, it takes about 10 seconds. It's very quick and easy, and it automatically submits at the end. So you will be able to get a call back.
Hannah, can I just ask, I'll do the chat, place it in now. There is one question. Do you have to be a citizen to become a foster carer?
Oh, an Australian citizen. That's a great question. So you are required to be an Australian citizen or a permanent resident. So we do need to be able to see that you do have some stability and permanency in Australia. But if you do have specific questions about your visa type or your situation, please take us up on the opportunity to have a bit more of a nuanced conversation with one of our team, and we can steer you in the right direction and give you the right answer. So I hope that answers your question for now. So Lou is going to pop that link in for the call me back form now.
All done.
Lovely. Thanks, Lou. And if you're like me and you're a personality type that's a bit impatient and you don't want to wait for a call back, that's okay. You can call us instead. So I've just got the number here, and there's an email address that you can contact us on as well. And don't worry about jotting those down and rushing. You can find them on our website quite easily. So please head along to the LWB Foster Care website if you would like. So if there's no more questions from the chat box, I'll take the opportunity just to show you this one final slide, everyone, which I think is a lovely one. And this is Stacey, who's one of the care leavers that we met in the presentation tonight, who grew up in foster care. And she knows that without her carer, she wouldn't be where she is today. And I think that's a really lovely message to end on. So thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Louise, for supporting me this evening as well. Much appreciated. And everybody, please do continue the conversation with us. Oh, I've just got is that a question I can see popping?
Yes. Can you please explain better how it works for weekend carers, obviously respite carers?
Okay, so how respite care works. So I wonder if they're asking how it works for the long-term carers to organise respite. But basically, if you're looking at the kind of weekend respite care and that's what you feel you'd be able to offer as a foster carer, then that's what we assess as part of the assessment. So we have a little bit of a look at your availability and all of those things that we've talked about throughout the assessment, age and needs levels of children, etc. And then we really work out, would you be able to provide that respite care for children? So I hope that answers your question. It's the same process for you to go through for all care types. We just make the different recommendations at the end. I hope that clarifies. Yeah. Love a last minute question.
And it's a lot of content to take in and reflect on. So if you do have questions afterwards, ring the telephone number Hannah's shown you, and you can always ask as many questions there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And fill in that call me back form if you'd like. And you can have a really in-depth conversation with one of our team who are, again, really good at answering questions. That's what we do for a living. So thank you everyone so much. I'd like to thank you for coming along this evening. It really is heartening for us when people want to come into this process and journey. And we do hope to see some more of you and see you further along the process. So I wish you all a very good night. Stay warm. Thanks all.
Good night.